Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Newt Gingrich. Newt Leroy Gingrich is an American politician and author from the state of Georgia who served as the 50th Speaker of the United States House of Representatives from 1995 to 1999. He represented Georgia's 6th Congressional District as a Republican from 1979 until his resignation in 1999. In 2012, Gingrich was a candidate for the Republican Party presidential nomination. A teacher of history and geography at the University of West Georgia in the 1970s, Gingrich won election to the United States House of Representatives in November 1978. The first Republican in the history of Georgia's 6th Congressional District to do so. He served as House Minority Whip from 1989-95 and Speaker of the House from 1995-99. A co-author and architect of the Contract with America, Gingrich was a major leader in the Republican victory in the 1994 congressional election. In 1995, Time named him Man of the Year for his role in ending the 4 decades-long Democratic majority in the House. As House Speaker, Gingrich oversaw passage by the House of Welfare Reform and a capital gains tax cut in 1997. The poor showing by Republicans in the 1998 congressional elections, a reprimand from the House for Gingrich's ethics violation and pressure from Republican colleagues, resulted in Gingrich's resignation from the speakership on November 6, 1998. He resigned altogether from the House on January 3, 1999. Since leaving the House, Gingrich has remained active in public policy debates and worked as a political consultant. He founded and chaired several policy think tanks including American Solutions for Winning the Future and the Center for Health Transformation. He has written or co-authored 27 books. In May 2011, he announced his campaign for the Republican presidential nomination. On May 2, 2012, Gingrich ended his presidential campaign and endorsed frontrunner Mitt Romney, who won the nomination. Early life, family and education. Newt Leroy McPherson was born at the Harrisburg Hospital in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on June 17, 1943. His mother Kathleen Kitt and father Newton Searles McPherson married in September 1942, when she was 16 and McPherson was 19. The marriage fell apart within days. He is of German, Scottish and Irish descent. In 1946, his mother married career Army officer Robert Gingrich, who adopted Newt. Robert Gingrich was a career Army officer who served tours in Korea and Vietnam. In 1956, the family moved to Europe, living for a period in Orléans, France and Stuttgart, Germany. Gingrich has 3 younger half-sisters, Candace and Susan Gingrich and Roberta Brown. Gingrich was raised in Hummelstown and on military bases where his father was stationed. The family's religion was Lutheran. He also has a half-sister and half-brother, Randy McPherson, from his father's side. In 1960, during his junior year in high school, the family moved to Georgia at Fort Benning. In 1961, Gingrich graduated from Baker High School in Columbus, Georgia. He had been interested in politics since his teen years while living with his family in Orléans, France. He visited the site of the Battle of Verdun and learned about the sacrifices made there and the importance of political leadership. Gingrich received a BA degree in history from Emory University in Atlanta in 1965. He went on to graduate study at Tulane University, earning an MA and a PhD in European history. He spent 6 months in Brussels in 1969-70 working on his dissertation, Belgian Education Policy in the Congo 1945-1960. Gingrich received deferments from the military during the years of the Vietnam War for being a student and a father. In 1985 he stated, "Given everything I believe in, a large part of me thinks I should have gone over." In 1970, Gingrich joined the history department at West Georgia College as an assistant professor. In 1974 he moved to the geography department, and was instrumental in establishing an interdisciplinary environmental studies program. He left the college in 1978 when he was elected to Congress. Early political career. Gingrich was the Southern Regional Director for Nelson Rockefeller in the 1968 Republican primaries. Congressional campaigns. In 1974 Gingrich made his first bid for political office as the Republican candidate in which stretched from the southern Atlanta suburbs to the Alabama state line. He lost to 20-year incumbent Democrat Jack Flint by 2,770 votes. Gingrich ran up huge margins in the suburban areas of the district but was unable to overcome Flint's lead in the more rural areas. Gingrich's relative success surprised political analysts. Flint had never faced a serious challenger. Gingrich was the second Republican to ever run against him. He did well against Flint, although 1974 was a disastrous year for Republican candidates nationally due to fallout from the Watergate scandal of the Nixon administration. Gingrich sought a rematch against Flint in 1976. While the Republicans did slightly better in the 1976 House elections than in 1974 nationally, the Democratic candidate in the 1976 presidential election was former Governor of Georgia Jimmy Carter. Carter won more than two-thirds of the vote in his native Georgia. Gingrich lost his race by 5,100 votes. As Gingrich primed for another run in the 1978 elections, Flint decided to retire. Gingrich defeated Democratic State Senator Virginia Sharpard by 7,500 votes. Gingrich was re-elected 6 times from this district. He faced a close general election race once, in the House elections of 1990, when he won by 978 votes in a race against Democrat David Worley. Although the district was trending Republican at the national level, conservative Democrats continued to hold most local offices, as well as most of the area's seats in the General Assembly well into the 1980s. In Congress. In 1981 Gingrich co-founded the Military Reform Caucus and the Congressional Aviation and Space Caucus. During the 1983 Congressional page sex scandal, Gingrich was among those calling for the expulsion of Representatives Dan Crane and Jerry Studs. Gingrich supported a proposal to ban loans from the International Monetary Fund to communist countries, and he endorsed a bill to make Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a national holiday. In 1983, Gingrich founded the Conservative Opportunity Society, a group that included young conservative House Republicans. Early COS members included Robert Smith Walker Judd Gregg Dan Coates and Connie Mack III. The group gradually expanded to include several dozen representatives who met each week to exchange and develop ideas. Gingrich's analysis of polls and public opinion identified the group's initial focus. Ronald Reagan adopted the Opportunity Society ideas for his 1984 re-election campaign, supporting the group's conservative goals on economic growth, education, crime, and social issues. He had not emphasized these during his first term. Reagan also referred to an Opportunity Society in the first State of the Union address of his second term. In May 1988, Gingrich brought ethics charges against Democratic Speaker Jim Wright, who was alleged to have used a book deal to circumvent campaign finance laws and House ethics rules. During the investigation, it was reported that Gingrich had his own unusual book deal, a window of opportunity in which publicity expenses were covered by a limited partnership. It raised $105,000 from Republican political supporters to promote sales of Gingrich's book. Gingrich's success in enforcing rights resignation contributed to his rising influence in the Republican caucus. In March 1989, Gingrich became House Minority Whip in a close election against Edward Rell Madigan. This was Gingrich's first formal position of power within the Republican Party. He said his intention to build a much more aggressive activist party. Early in his role as whip, in May 1989, Gingrich was involved in talks about the appointment of a Panamanian administrator of the Panama Canal, which was scheduled to occur in 1989 subject to U.S. government approval. Gingrich was outspoken in his opposition to giving control over the canal to an administrator appointed by the dictatorship in Panama. Gingrich and others in the House, including the newly minted Gang of Seven, railed against what they saw as ethical lapses. During the nearly 40 years of Democratic control for almost 40 years, the House banking scandal and Congressional post office scandal were emblems of the exposed corruption. Gingrich himself was among members of the House who had written NSF checks on the House bank. He had overdrafts on 22 checks, including a $9,463 check to the Internal Revenue Service in 1990. In 1990, after consulting focus groups, with the help of pollster Frank Luntz, GOPAC distributed a memo with a cover letter signed by Gingrich titled "Language: A Key Mechanism of Control," that encouraged Republicans to speak like Newt. It contained lists of contrasting words with negative connotations such as radical, sick and traitors, and optimistic, positive governing words such as opportunity, courage and principled, that Gingrich recommended for use in describing Democrats and Republicans respectively. Due to population increases recorded in the 1990 United States Census, Georgia picked up an additional seat for the 1992 U.S. House elections. However, the Democratic-controlled Georgia General Assembly, under the leadership of fiercely partisan Speaker of the House Tom Murphy, specifically targeted Gingrich, eliminating the district which Gingrich represented. Gerrymandering split Gingrich's territory among 3 neighboring districts. Much of the southern portion of Gingrich's district, including his home in Carrollton, was drawn into the Columbus-based 3rd District represented by 5-term Democrat Richard Ray. Gingrich remarked that the Speaker, by raising money and gerrymandering, has sincerely dedicated a part of his career to wiping me out. At the same time, the Assembly created a new heavily Republican 6th District in Fulton and Cobb counties in the wealthy northern suburbs of Atlanta, an area that Gingrich had never represented. Gingrich sold his home in Carrollton and moved to Marietta in the new 6th. His primary opponent, State Representative Herman Clark, made an issue out of Gingrich's 22 overdraft checks in the House bank scandal, and also criticized Gingrich for moving into the district. After a recount, Gingrich prevailed by 980 votes with a 51% to 49% result, his winning the primary all but assured him of election in November. He was re-elected 3 times from this district against nominal Democratic opposition. Republican Revolution of 1994. In the 1994 campaign season, in an effort to offer an alternative to Democratic policies and to unite distant wings of the Republican Party, Gingrich and several other Republicans came up with a contract with America which laid out 10 policies that Republicans promised to bring to a vote on the House floor during the first 100 days of the new Congress. If they won the election, The contract was signed by Gingrich and other Republican candidates for the House of Representatives. The contract ranged from issues such as welfare reform, term limits, tougher crime laws and a balanced budget law, to more specialized legislation such as restrictions on American military participation in United Nations missions. In the November 1994 elections, Republicans gained 54 seats and took control of the House for the first time since 1954. Longtime House Minority Leader Bob Michel of Illinois had not run for re-election, giving Gingrich the highest-ranking Republican returning to Congress the inside track at becoming Speaker. The midterm election that turned congressional power over to Republicans changed the center of gravity in the nation's capital. Time magazine named Gingrich its 1995 Man of the Year for his role in the election. Speaker of the House. The House fulfilled Gingrich's promise to bring all 10 of the contract's issues to a vote within the first 100 days of the session. President Clinton called it the Contract on America legislation proposed by the 104th United States Congress included term limits for congressional representatives, tax cuts, welfare reform and a balanced budget amendment, as well as independent auditing of the finances of the House of Representatives, and elimination of non-essential services such as the House barbershop and shoe-shine concessions. Following Gingrich's first 2 years as House Speaker, the Republican majority was re-elected in the 1996 election, the first time Republicans had done so in 68 years and the first time simultaneously with a Democratic president winning re-election. Welfare reform. A central pledge of President Bill Clinton's campaign was to reform the welfare system, adding changes such as work requirements for recipients. However, by 1994, the Clinton administration appeared to be more concerned with pursuing a universal health care program. Gingrich accused Clinton of stalling on welfare, and proclaimed that Congress could pass a welfare reform bill in as little as 90 days. He insisted that the Republican Party would continue to apply political pressure to the president to approve their welfare legislation. In 1996, after constructing 2 welfare reform bills that Clinton vetoed, Gingrich and his supporters pushed for passage of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act, which was intended to reconstruct the welfare system. The act gave state governments more autonomy over welfare delivery while also reducing the federal government's responsibilities. It instituted the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, which placed time limits on welfare assistance and replaced the long-standing Aid to Families with Dependent Children program. Other changes to the welfare system included stricter conditions for food stamp eligibility, reductions in immigrant welfare assistance, and work requirements for recipients. The bill was signed into law by President Clinton on August 22, 1996. In his 1998 book Lessons Learned the Hard Way, Gingrich encouraged volunteerism and spiritual renewal, placing more importance on families, creating tax incentives, and reducing regulations for businesses in poor neighborhoods, and increasing property ownership by low-income families. He also praised Habitat for Humanity for sparking the movement to improve people's lives by helping them build their own homes. Balancing the federal budget. Although congressional Republicans had opposed Clinton's Deficit Reduction Act of 1993, a key aspect of the 1994 contract with America was the promise of a balanced federal budget. After the end of the government shutdown, Gingrich and other Republican leaders acknowledged that Congress would not be able to draft a balanced budget in 1996. Instead, they opted to approve some small reductions that were already approved by the White House and to wait until the next election season. By May 1997, Republican congressional leaders reached a compromise with Democrats and President Clinton on the federal budget. The agreement called for a federal spending plan designed to reduce the federal deficit and achieve a balanced budget. By 2002, the plan included a total of $152 billion in bipartisan tax cuts over 5 years. Other major parts of the spending plan called for $115 billion to be saved through a restructuring of Medicare, $24 billion set aside to extend health insurance to children of the working poor, tax credits for college tuition, and a $2 billion welfare to work jobs initiative. President Clinton signed the budget legislation in August 1997. At the signing, Gingrich gave credit to ordinary Americans, stating, "It was their political will that brought the two parties together." In early 1998, with the economy performing better than expected, increased tax revenues helped reduce the federal budget deficit to below $25 billion. Clinton submitted a balanced budget for 1999 3 years ahead of schedule originally proposed, making it the first time the federal budget had been balanced since 1969. Taxpayer Relief Act of 1997. In 1997, President Clinton signed into effect the Taxpayer Relief Act of 1997, which included the largest capital gains tax cut in U.S. history. Under the Act, the profits on the sale of a personal residence were exempted if lived in for at least 2 years. Over the last 5, there were also reductions in a number of other taxes on investment gains. Additionally, the Act raised the value of inherited estates and gifts that could be sheltered from taxation. Gingrich has been credited with creating the agenda for the reduction in capital gains tax, especially in the Contract with America, which set out to balance the budget and implement decreases in estate and capital gains tax. Some Republicans felt that the compromise reached with Clinton on the budget and Tax Act was inadequate. However, Gingrich has stated that the tax cuts were a significant accomplishment for the Republican Congress in the face of opposition from the Clinton administration. Gingrich, along with Bob Dole, had earlier set up the Kemp Commission, headed by former U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Jack Kemp, a tax reform commission that made several recommendations, including that dividends, interest, and capital gains should be untaxed. Other legislation. Among the first pieces of legislation passed by the new Congress under Gingrich was the Congressional Accountability Act of 1995, which subjected members of Congress to the same laws that apply to businesses and their employees, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. As a provision of the Contract with America, the law was symbolic of the new Republican majority's goal to remove some of the entitlements enjoyed by Congress. The bill received near universal acceptance from the House and Senate, and was signed into law on January 23, 1995. Gingrich shut down the highly regarded Office of Technology Assessment, and relied instead on what the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists called self-interested lobbyists and think tanks. Government shutdown. Gingrich and the incoming Republican majority's promise to slow the rate of government spending conflicted with the president's agenda for Medicare, education, the environment and public health, leading to 2 temporary shutdowns of the federal government totaling 28 days. Clinton said Republican amendments would strip the U.S. Treasury of its ability to dip into federal trust funds to avoid a borrowing crisis. Republican amendments would have limited appeals by death row inmates, made it harder to issue health, safety and environmental regulations, and would have committed the president to a 7-year balanced budget. Clinton vetoed a second bill allowing the government to keep operating beyond the time when most spending authority expires. A GOP amendment opposed by Clinton would not only have increased Medicare Part B premiums, but it would also cancel a scheduled reduction the Republicans held out for an increase in Medicare Part B premiums in January 1996 to $53.50 a month. Clinton favored the then-current law, which was to let the premium that seniors pay drop to $42.50. The government closed most non-essential offices during the shutdown, which was the longest in U.S. history. The shutdown ended when Clinton agreed to submit a CBO-approved balanced budget plan. During the crisis, Gingrich's public image suffered from the perception that the Republicans' hardline budget stance was owed partly to an alleged snub of Gingrich by Clinton during a flight on Air Force One to and from Yitzhak Rabin's funeral in Israel. That perception developed after the trip when Gingrich, while being questioned by Lars Erik Nelson at a Christian Science Monitor breakfast, said that he was dissatisfied that Clinton had not invited him to discuss the budget. During the flight, he complained that he and Dole were instructed to use the plane's rear exit to deplane, saying the snub was a part of why you ended up with this, sending down a tougher continuing resolution. In response to Gingrich's complaint that they were forced to use the rear door, NBC News released their videotape footage showing both Gingrich and Dole disembarking at Tel Aviv just behind Clinton via the front stairway. Gingrich was widely lampooned for implying that the government shutdown was a result of his personal grievances, including a widely shared editorial cartoon depicting him as a baby throwing a tantrum. Democratic leaders including Chuck Schumer took the opportunity to attack Gingrich's motives for the budget standoff. In 1998, Gingrich said that these comments were his single most avoidable mistake as Speaker, discussing the impact of the government shutdown on the Republican Party. Gingrich later commented that everybody in Washington thinks that was a big mistake. They're exactly wrong. There had been no re-elected Republican majority since 1928. Part of the reason we got re-elected is our base thought we were serious. And they thought we were serious because when it came to a showdown we didn't flinch. In a 2011 op-ed in the Washington Post, Gingrich said that the government shutdown led to the balanced budget deal in 1997 and the first 4 consecutive balanced budgets since the 1920s, as well as the first re-election of a Republican majority since 1928. Ethics charges and reprimand. 84 ethics charges were filed by Democrats against Gingrich during his term as Speaker. All were eventually dropped except for one, claiming tax-exempt status for a college course run for political purposes. On January 21, 1997, the House officially reprimanded Gingrich and ordered him to reimburse the House for some of the costs of the investigation in the amount of $300,000. It was the first time a speaker was disciplined for an ethics violation. Additionally, the House Ethics Committee concluded that inaccurate information supplied to investigators represented intentional or reckless disregard of House rules. The Ethics Committee's special counsel James M. Cole concluded that Gingrich had violated federal tax law and had lied to the ethics panel in an effort to force the committee to dismiss the complaint against him. The full committee panel did not agree whether tax law had been violated and left that issue up to the IRS. In 1999, the IRS cleared the organizations connected with the Renewing American Civilization courses under investigation for possible tax violations. Regarding the situation, Gingrich said in January 1997, "I did not manage the effort intensely enough to thoroughly direct or review information being submitted to the committee on my behalf, in my name and over my signature. Inaccurate, incomplete and unreliable statements were given to the committee. But I did not intend to mislead the committee. I brought down on the People's House a controversy which could weaken the faith people have in their government. Leadership challenge. In the summer of 1997, several House Republicans attempted to replace him as Speaker, claiming Gingrich's public image was a liability. The attempted coup began July 9, with a meeting of Republican Conference Chairman John Boehner of Ohio, and Republican Leadership Chairman Bill Paxon of New York. According to their plan, House Majority Leader Dick Armey, House Majority Whip Tom DeLay, Boehner and Paxon were to present Gingrich with an ultimatum: resign or be voted out. However, Armey balked at the proposal to make Paxon the new Speaker and told his Chief of Staff to warn Gingrich. On July 11, Gingrich met with senior Republican leadership to assess the situation. He explained that under no circumstance would he step down. If he was voted out, there would be a new election for Speaker. This would allow for the possibility that Democrats, along with dissenting Republicans, would vote in Democrat Dick Gephardt as Speaker. On July 16, Paxon offered to resign his post, feeling that he had not handled the situation correctly, as the only member of the leadership who had been appointed to his position by Gingrich, instead of elected. Resignation. In 1998, Republicans lost 5 seats in the House, the worst midterm performance in 64 years, by a party not holding the presidency. Gingrich, who won his re-election, was held largely responsible for Republican losses in the House. His private polls had given his fellow Republican Congress the impression that pushing the Lewinsky scandal would damage Clinton's popularity and result in the party winning a net total of 6 to 30 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives in this election. The day after the election, a Republican caucus ready to rebel against him prompted his resignation of the speakership. He also announced his intended and eventual full departure from the House in January 1999. When relinquishing the speakership, Gingrich said he was not willing to preside over people who are cannibals and claimed that leaving the House would keep him from overshadowing his successor. Post-speakership. Gingrich has since remained involved in national politics and public policy debate, especially on issues regarding healthcare, national security, and the role of religion in American public life. Policy. In 2003, he founded the Center for Health Transformation. Gingrich supported the Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act of 2003, creating the Medicare Part D federal prescription drugs benefit program. Some conservatives have criticized him for favoring the plan due to its cost. However, Gingrich has remained a supporter, stating in a 2011 interview that it was a necessary modernization of Medicare, which was created before pharmaceutical drugs became standard in medical care. He has said that the increase in cost from medication must be seen as preventive, leading to reduced need for medical procedures. In a May 15, 2011 interview on Meet the Press, Gingrich repeated his long-held belief that all of us have a responsibility to help pay for healthcare, and suggested this could be implemented by either a mandate to obtain health insurance or a requirement to post a bond ensuring coverage. In the same interview, Gingrich said, "I don't think right-wing social engineering is any more desirable than left-wing social engineering. I don't think imposing radical change from the right or the left is a very good way for a free society to operate." This comment caused backlash within the Republican Party. In 2005, with Hillary Clinton Gingrich announced the proposed 21st Century Health Information Act, a bill which aimed to replace paperwork with confidential electronic health information networks. Gingrich also co-chaired an independent congressional study group made up of health policy experts, formed in 2007 to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of action taken within the U.S. to fight Alzheimer's disease. Gingrich has served on several commissions, including the Hart-Rudman Commission, formerly known as the U.S. Commission on National Security, 21st Century, which examined national security issues affecting the armed forces, law enforcement, and intelligence agencies. In 2005 he became the co-chair of a task force for UN reform, which aimed to produce a plan for the U.S. to help strengthen the UN. For over 2 decades, Gingrich has taught at the United States Air Force's Air University, where he is the longest-serving teacher of the Joint Flag Officer Warfighting course. In addition, he is an honorary distinguished visiting scholar and professor at the National Defense University, and teaches officers from all of the defense services. Gingrich informally advised Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld on strategic issues, including the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and encouraging the Pentagon to not yield foreign policy influence to the State Department and National Security Council. Gingrich is also a guiding coalition member of the Project on National Security Reform. Gingrich founded and served as the chairman of American Solutions for Winning the Future, a 527 group established by Gingrich in 2007. The group was a fundraising juggernaut that raised $52 million from major donors such as Sheldon Adelson and the coal company Peabody Energy. The group promoted deregulation, and increased offshore oil drilling and other fossil fuel extraction, and opposed the Employee Free Choice Act. Politico reported the operation, which includes a pollster and fundraisers, promotes Gingrich's books, sends out direct mail, airs ads touting his causes, and funds his travel across the country. American Solutions closed in 2011 after he left the organization. Other organizations and companies founded or chaired by Gingrich include the creative production company Gingrich Productions, and religious educational organization Renewing American Leadership. Gingrich is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He is a fellow at conservative think tanks the American Enterprise Institute and Hoover Institution. He sometimes serves as a commentator, guest, or panel member on cable news shows, such as the Fox News Channel. He is listed as a contributor by Fox News Channel, and frequently appears as a guest on various segments. He has also hosted occasional specials for the Fox News Channel. Gingrich is a proponent of the Lean Six Sigma management techniques for waste reduction and has signed the Strong America Now pledge, committing to promoting the methods to reduce government spending. Businesses. After leaving Congress in 1999, Gingrich started a number of for-profit companies. Between 2001 and 2010, the companies he and his wife owned in full or part had revenues of almost $100 million. Currently, Gingrich serves as an advisor to the Canadian mining company Barrick Gold. According to financial disclosure forms released in July 2011, Gingrich and his wife had a net worth of at least $6.7 million in 2010 compared to a maximum net worth of $2.4 million in 2006. Most of the increase in his net worth was because of payments to him from his for-profit companies, Gingrich Group and the Center for Health Transformation. The Gingrich Group was organized in 1999 as a consulting company. Over time, its non-health clients were dropped and it was renamed the Center for Health Transformation. The two companies had revenues of $55 million between 2001 and 2010. The revenues came from more than 300 health insurance companies and other clients, with membership costing as much as $200,000 per year in exchange for access to Gingrich and other perks. In 2011, when Gingrich became a presidential candidate, he sold his interest in the business and said he would release the full list of his clients and the amounts he was paid to the extent we can. In April 2012, the Center for Health Transformation filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, planning to liquidate its assets to meet debts of $10 million. Between 2001 and 2010, Gingrich consulted for Freddie Mac, a government-sponsored secondary home mortgage company, which was concerned about new regulations under consideration by Congress regarding payments of $1.6 million for the consulting. Gingrich said that Freddie Mac paid Gingrich Group, which has a number of employees and a number of officers, a consulting fee just like he would pay any other consulting firm. In January 2012, he said that he could not make public his contract with Freddie Mac, even though the company gave permission, until his business partners in the Center for Health Transformation also agreed to that. Gingrich Productions. Gingrich Productions, which is headed by Gingrich's wife Callista Gingrich, was created in 2007. According to the company's website, in May 2011, it is a performance and production company featuring the work of Newt and Callista Gingrich. Newt and Callista host and produce historical and public policy documentaries, write books, record audiobooks and voiceovers, produce photographic essays, and make television and radio appearances. Between 2008 and 2011, the company produced 3 films on religion, 1 on energy, 1 on Ronald Reagan, and 1 on the threat of radical Islam. All were joint projects with the conservative group Citizens United. In 2011, Newt and Callista appeared in A City Upon a Hill on the subject of American exceptionalism. As of May 2011, the company had about 5 employees. In 2010, it paid Gingrich more than $2.4 million. Gingrich Communications. Gingrich Communications promoted Gingrich's public appearances, including his Fox News contract and his website newt.org. Gingrich received as much as $60,000 for a speech, and did as many as 80 in a year. One of Gingrich's nonprofit groups, Renewing American Leadership, which was founded in March 2009, paid Gingrich Communications $220,000 over 2 years. The charity shared the names of its donors with Gingrich, who could use them for his for-profit companies. Gingrich Communications, which employed 15 people at its largest, closed in 2011 when Gingrich began his presidential campaign. Political activity. Between 2005 and 2007, Gingrich expressed interest in running for the 2008 Republican presidential nomination. On October 13, 2005, Gingrich suggested he was considering a run for president, saying, "There are circumstances where I will run," elaborating that those circumstances would be if no other candidate champions some of the platform ideas he advocates. On September 28, 2007, Gingrich announced that if his supporters pledged $30 million to his campaign by October 21, he would seek the nomination, however insisting that he had pretty strongly considered running. On September 29, spokesman Rick Tyler said that Gingrich would not seek the presidency in 2008 because he could not continue to serve as chairman of American Solutions if he did so. Citing campaign finance law restrictions, Gingrich said, "I wasn't prepared to abandon American Solutions, even to explore whether a campaign was realistic." During the 2009 special election in New York's 23rd Congressional District, Gingrich endorsed endorsed moderate Republican candidate Dede Scott Safava rather than Conservative Party candidate Doug Hoffman, who had been endorsed by several nationally prominent Republicans. He was heavily criticized for this endorsement, with conservatives questioning his candidacy for president in 2012 and even comparing him to Benedict Arnold. Gingrich has since regretted his decision. 2012 presidential campaign. In late 2008, several political commentators, including Mark Ambinder in The Atlantic and Robert Novak in The Washington Post, identified Gingrich as a top presidential contender in the 2012 election, with Ambinder reporting that Gingrich was already planting some seeds in Iowa and New Hampshire. A July 2010 poll conducted by Public Policy Polling indicated that Gingrich was the leading GOP contender for the Republican nomination, with 23% of likely Republican voters saying they would vote for him, describing his views as a possible candidate during an appearance on the Record with Greta Van Susteren in March 2009. Gingrich said, "I am very sad that a number of Republicans do not understand that this country is sick of earmarks. Americans are sick of politicians taking care of themselves. They are sick of their money being spent in a way that is absolutely indefensible. I think you're going to see a steady increase in the number of incumbents who have opponents, because the American taxpayers are increasingly fed up." On March 3, 2011, Gingrich officially announced a website entitled Newt Exploratory 2012, in lieu of a formal exploratory committee for exploration of a potential presidential run. On May 11, 2011, Gingrich officially announced his intention to seek the GOP nomination in 2012. On June 9, 2011, a group of Gingrich's senior campaign aides left the campaign en masse, leading to doubts about the viability of his presidential run. On June 21, 2011, two more senior aides left. In response, Gingrich stated that he had not quit the race for the Republican nomination, and pointed to his experience running for 5 years to win his seat in Congress, spending 16 years helping to build a Republican majority in the House and working for decades to build a Republican majority in Georgia. Some commentators noted Gingrich's resilience throughout his career, in particular with regards to his presidential campaign. After then frontrunner Herman Cain was damaged by allegations of past sexual harassment, Gingrich gained support and quickly became a contender in the race, especially after Cain suspended his campaign. By December 4, 2011, Gingrich was leading in the national polls. However, after an abundance of negative ads run by his opponents throughout December, Gingrich's national polling lead had fallen to a tie with Mitt Romney. On January 3, 2012, Gingrich finished in fourth place in the Iowa Republican caucuses, far behind Rick Santorum, Romney, and Ron Paul. On January 10, Gingrich finished in fifth place in the New Hampshire Republican primary, far behind Romney, Santorum, John Huntsman and Paul. After the field narrowed with the withdrawal from the race of Huntsman and Rick Perry, Gingrich won the South Carolina Republican primary on January 21, obtaining about 40% of the vote, considerably ahead of Romney, Santorum and Paul. This surprise victory allowed Gingrich to re-emerge as the frontrunner once again heading into Florida. On January 31, 2012, Gingrich placed second in the Republican Florida primary, losing by a 15 percentage point margin, 47% to 32%. Some factors that contributed to this outcome include two strong debate performances by Romney, the wide margin by which the Gingrich campaign was outspent in television ads, and a widely criticized proposal by Gingrich to have a permanent colony on the Moon by 2020 to reinvigorate the American space program. It was later revealed Romney had hired a debate coach to help him perform better in the Florida debates. Gingrich did, however, significantly outvote Santorum and Paul. On February 4, 2012, Gingrich placed a distant second in the Nevada Republican caucuses, with 21% losing to Romney, who received over 50% of the total votes cast. On February 7, 2012, Gingrich came in last place in the Minnesota Republican caucuses with about 10.7% of the vote. Santorum won the caucus, followed by Paul and Romney. On Super Tuesday, Gingrich won his home state, Georgia, which has the most delegates in an otherwise dismal night for him. Santorum took Tennessee and Oklahoma, where Gingrich had previously performed well in the polls. Though Gingrich managed a statistical second-place showing in Oklahoma. On April 4, the Rick Santorum campaign shifted its position and urged Gingrich to drop out of the race and support Santorum. On April 10, Santorum announced the suspension of his campaign. Following this announcement, the Newt 2012 campaign used a new slogan referring to Gingrich as the last conservative standing. Despite this, on April 19, Gingrich told Republicans in New York that he would work to help Romney win the general election if Romney secured the nomination. After a disappointing second-place showing in the Delaware primary on April 24 and with a campaign debt in excess of $4 million, Gingrich suspended his campaign and endorsed frontrunner Mitt Romney on May 2, 2012, on whose behalf he subsequently campaigned. Gingrich later hosted a number of policy workshops at the GOP convention in Tampa presented by the National Republican Committee called Newt University. He and his wife Callista addressed the convention on its final day with a Ronald Reagan-themed introduction. In 2016, Newt Gingrich filed a debt settlement plan document with the Federal Election Commission indicating his 2012 presidential campaign would pay $0 toward the more than $4.6 million in unpaid debts owed to 114 businesses and consultants. 2016 Donald Trump presidential campaign. After having consulted for Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, Gingrich encouraged his fellow Republicans to unify behind Trump, who had, by then, become the presumptive Republican presidential nominee. Gingrich reportedly figured among Trump's final three choices to be his running mate. The position ultimately went to Mike Pence, a politician known for his role as governor of Indiana. Following Trump's victory in the presidential election, speculation arose concerning Gingrich as a possible Secretary of State or Chief of Staff or advisor. Eventually, Gingrich announced that he would not be serving in the cabinet. He stated that he didn't have the interest in serving in any role related to the Trump administration, stressing that as a private citizen he would engage with individuals for strategic planning rather than job-seeking. In May 2017, he promoted a conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party had Seth Rich, an employee for the Democratic National Committee, killed during the 2016 presidential race. Political positions. Gingrich is most widely identified with a 1994 contract with America. He is a founder of American Solutions for Winning the Future. More recently, Gingrich has advocated replacing the Environmental Protection Agency with a proposed Environmental Solutions Agency. He favors a strong immigration border policy and a guest worker program. In terms of energy policy, HES argued in favor of flex fuel mandates for cars sold in the U.S. and promoted the use of ethanol generally. Gingrich has taken a diminutive view of internationalism and the United Nations. He said in 2015, "After several years of looking at the UN, I can report to you that it is sufficiently corrupt and sufficiently inefficient that no reasonable person would put faith in it." In 2007, Gingrich authored a book Rediscovering God in America, arguing that the Founding Fathers actively intended the new republic to not only allow, but encourage religious expression in the public square. Following publication of the book, he was invited by Jerry Falwell to be the speaker for the second time at Liberty University's graduation on May 19, 2007, due to Gingrich having dedicated much of his time to calling the United States of America back to our Christian heritage. Gingrich's later books take a large-scale policy focus, including Winning the Future and the most recent To Save America. Gingrich has identified education as the #1 factor in our future prosperity, and has partnered with Al Sharpton and Education Secretary Arne Duncan on education issues, although he previously opposed gay marriage. In December 2012, Gingrich suggested that Republicans should reconsider their opposition to it. On July 14, 2016, Gingrich stated that he believes that Americans of Muslim backgrounds who believe in Sharia law should be deported, and that visiting websites that promote the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant or Al-Qaeda should be a felony. Some observers have questioned whether these views violate the free speech and free exercise of religion clauses of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. On July 21, 2016, Gingrich argued that members of NATO ought to worry about a U.S. commitment to their defense. He expanded, saying they ought to worry about commitment under any circumstances. Every president has been saying that the NATO countries do not pay their fair share. He also stated that in the context of whether the United States would provide aid to Estonia in the event of a Russian invasion, he would think about it a great deal. On December 7, 2016, the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, Gingrich was condemned by many after he tweeted that 75 years ago the Japanese displayed professional brilliance and technological power, launching surprises from Hawaii to the Philippines. Marriages and children. Gingrich has married 3 times. In 1962 he married Jacqueline May "Jackie" Batley, his former high school geometry teacher, when he was 19 years old and she was 26. They have 2 daughters from their marriage. Kathy Gingrich Lubbers, married to Paul Lubbers, is president of Gingrich Communications, and Jackie Gingrich Cushman, the wife of Jimmy Cushman Jr., is an author, conservative columnist and political commentator whose books include 5 Principles for a Successful Life, co-authored with Newt Gingrich. In the spring of 1980, Gingrich left his wife after beginning an affair with Marianne Ginther. In 1984, Jackie Batley Gingrich told The Washington Post that the divorce was a complete surprise to her. According to Jackie, in September 1980, Gingrich and their children visited her while she was in the hospital recovering from surgery for cancer, and Gingrich wanted to discuss the terms of their divorce. Gingrich has disputed that account. In 2011, their daughter Jackie Gingrich Cushman stated it was her mother who requested the divorce, that it happened prior to the hospital stay, and that Gingrich's visit was for the purpose of bringing the couple's children to see their mother, not to discuss the divorce. Although Gingrich's presidential campaign staff continued to insist in 2011 that his wife requested the divorce, court documents obtained by CNN from Carroll County, Georgia, indicated that Jackie had asked a judge to block the process, stating that although she has adequate and ample grounds for divorce, she does not desire one at this time, and does not admit that this marriage is irretrievably broken. The daughter of the former Linda May Clay and Wilbur Allen Batley, Jackie Gingrich was a native of Columbus, Georgia. She was a deacon and active volunteer in the First Baptist Church of Carrollton, Georgia. She died in Atlanta at the age of 77. According to L. H. Carter, Gingrich's campaign treasurer, Gingrich said of his first wife, "She's not young enough or pretty enough to be the wife of the president. And besides, she has cancer." Gingrich has denied saying it. His supporters dismiss Carter as a disgruntled former aide who was miffed at not being asked to accompany Gingrich to Washington. In 1981, 6 months after his divorce from his first wife was final, Gingrich wed Marianne Gingrich. Marianne helped control their finances to get them out of debt. She was also co-author of his 1984 book Window of Opportunity, A Blueprint for the Future. She did not, however, want to have the public life of a politician's wife. Gingrich's daughter Kathy Lubbers described the marriage as difficult. In 1993, while still married to Marianne, Gingrich began an affair with House of Representatives staffer Callista Bisek, more than 2 decades his junior. Gingrich and his second wife were divorced in 2000. The marriage produced no children. On January 19, 2012, Marianne Gingrich alleged in an interview on ABC's Nightline that she had declined to accept Gingrich's suggestion of an open marriage. Asked about the allegations at the beginning of the televised South Carolina primary debate, Gingrich said the story was false and told moderator John King that making an ex-wife a significant question in a presidential campaign was close to despicable. Gingrich received a standing ovation for parlaying a personal scandal into an attack on what he perceived as biased media. In August 2000, Gingrich married Callista Bisek 4 months after his divorce from Marianne was finalized. He and Callista live in McLean, Virginia. In a 2011 interview with David Brody of the Christian Broadcasting Network, Gingrich addressed his past infidelities by saying, "There's no question at times in my life, partially driven by how passionately I felt about this country, that I worked too hard, and things happened in my life that were not appropriate." In December 2011, after the group Irons for Christian Leaders in Government requested that he sign their so-called marriage vow, Gingrich sent a lengthy written response. It included his pledge to uphold personal fidelity to my spouse. Religion. Raised as a Lutheran, Gingrich was a Southern Baptist in graduate school. He converted to Catholicism by sex faith on March 29, 2009. He said, "Over the course of several years, I gradually became Catholic and then decided one day to accept the faith I had already come to embrace." He decided to officially become a Catholic when he saw Pope Benedict XVI during the Pope's visit to the United States in 2008. Catching a glimpse of Pope Benedict that day, I was struck by the happiness and peacefulness he exuded. The joyful and radiating presence of the Holy Father was a moment of confirmation about the many things I had been thinking and experiencing for several years. At a 2011 appearance in Columbus, Ohio, he said, "In America, religious belief is being challenged by a cultural elite trying to create a secularized America in which God is driven out of public life." The Catholic Church recognizes his third marriage as a valid marriage, based on an annulment granted for his second marriage and the passing of his wife from his first. Other interests. Gingrich has written about his interest in animals. Gingrich's first engagement in civic affairs was speaking to the city council in his native Harrisburg, Pennsylvania as to why the city should establish its own zoo. He wrote the introduction to America's Best Zoos. He is also a dinosaur enthusiast. The New Yorker said of his 1995 book To Renew America, "Charmingly, he has retained his enthusiasm for the extinct giants into middle age." In addition to including breakthroughs in dinosaur research on his list of futuristic wonders, he specified people interested in dinosaurs as a prime example of who might benefit From his education proposals, space exploration has been an interest since his fascination with the United States, Soviet Union space race during his teenage years. Gingrich wants the U.S. to pursue new achievements in space such as sustaining civilizations beyond Earth, but advocates relying more on the private sector and less on the publicly funded NASA to drive progress. Since 2010 he has served on the National Space Society Board of Governors. During the 2012 election campaign, ArtInfo noted that Gingrich has expressed appreciation for the work of two American painters. He has described James H. Cromartie's painting of the U.S. Capitol as an exceptional and truly beautiful work of art. In Norman Rockwell's work, he saw the embodiment of an America circa 1965 at odds with the prevailing sentiment of the modern-day cultural elites. CNN announced on June 26, 2013, that Gingrich would join a new version of Crossfire relaunching in fall 2013 with panelists S.E. Cupp, Stephanie Cutter and Van Jones. Gingrich represented the right on the revamped debate program. The show was cancelled the following year. Fiction. Gingrich co-wrote the following alternate history novels and series of novels with William R. Forstchen. Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Would you like to know more?